there's one core problem with all of these claims. This is the elected president of the United States. He determines if a document's classified or not. He determines a document is secret or not. He determines whether it's a government document or not. Congress can't do that. Justice Department can't do that. The intelligence community can't do that. This is an indictment saying Donald Trump used his own documents, kept his own documents, liked his own documents, and didn't want to give his own documents back. That's his constitutional right. So the problem with this case is the entire case is bogus. Instead, this is an attempt of the deep state to overturn our constitutional democracy, to say that they can tell the world when their secrets get to be disclosed. That's what this case is premised on. Donald Trump rebutting the lies of General Milley, who lied to Bob Woodward, who claimed that he had stopped Trump from waging war in Iran, when it was actually Trump that stopped Milley from waging war in Iran. Now, here Milley is, by the admission of the indictment, leaking actual information that he was not entitled to disclose, that he was not entitled to declassify, that he was not entitled to declare a personal record, that is subject to national security information laws because he is a lesser official subject to those laws. And yet there has been no indictment, not even investigation of Milley, and he's still in legal office today with Republicans in Congress doing jack about it. By contrast, the president, who is vested by the second article of the United States Constitution with all executive power. That means the president decides any information that comes in is classified for his benefit and his alone. It is only secret for his benefit and his alone. It is only national security information for his benefit and his alone. He can unilaterally declare anything declassified, not national security, a personal record, anytime he wants.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Occasional Rescue Michigan midweek live stream. With me once again is Shane Trejo, and we've got a lot to go over tonight because our show on Sunday was kind of monopolized with all this talk about the presidential primary. How's it going, buddy?
It's going, a lot of things going on. Not all bad, so I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, and we should continue to fight and be smart. That's very important as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about what we did with the presidential primary last weekend, which you and I have both had a bit of a hand in, wouldn't you say? I mean, I think the show that we did with you and Dr. Steele was very influential in getting a lot of the members of the state committee to really dig into this and do a lot of due diligence and to seize the opportunity that we had. So congratulations, buddy.
Well, I think that, we definitely helped lay the groundwork for what was done. And, I don't think it was necessarily, I think, we got it out there early. We got ahead of the issue, and we were kind of able to frame it for the grassroots in a way that explained it to them in a way that that was very, I think, helpful to them. And, it was nice to see the RNC and the MIGOP get on the same page. Seems like all the right people are really angry about it. So we'll see how the actual process plays out. There's still kind of a lot that's up for grabs as to how the caucus will be administered, from what I've been told. So we're just going to stay vigilant and try to make sure we get the best, fairest process that we have. But it's great that, we've taken a big strike at the unfair open primary process that we've hated, that conservative activists have hated for as long as I can remember.
Yeah. By the way, it looks like you got a shout out from George Hiller in the chat on Facebook, who originally posted shave, but then clarified, because I was thinking he was telling us that we need to shave. So I'm glad he clarified that. But
thank you, George.
I think there's definitely going to be some details that still need to be worked out, but the thrust of it's clear. And it sounds to me like what the district caucuses essentially will be is just like that part of a state convention that's just the district caucuses, rather than when the whole state gets together all in one big room. So it's going to be the rules of a state convention, and the rules of a county convention that come with it, which, you and I have both seen a lot of shenanigans with that over the years. But, that's where it takes people getting experience in these and gaining these. And that's something that has taken time for you and me and does for everybody. But I think, the interest that we've seen in having a fair process, like even the recent state conventions, which, overall, I thought the way they were, the things that happened in them were atrocities, but the procedures that they followed were actually better than they had been in the past, in the sense that they actually did give delegates the ability to make floor amendments and things like that, and having, certainly more time consuming, but at least more transparent, a more transparent voting process. So
Yeah, it had never been more fairer than it was at the last convention. And generally, when it is fair and the delegates' voices are heard, it is going to be a little bit more raucous. It's going to be more unruly. But at the same time, that's what's the alternative? It's just, the crooked chair getting up there gaveling everything through. That's kind of what I heard at state committee too. It was, a bit tedious, but at the end of the day, everyone's voices were heard. And I think a lot of people felt that their concerns were addressed about the proposal, including me. I thought I didn't like that it was thrust on people at the last minute, but it does seem like because of what was going on with the RNC and them kind of dragging their feet on getting the information that the policy committee needed, that seemed to be the reason for why it took so long and was put out there at the last minute. So I'm willing to take it in good faith and be optimistic about the whole process and continue working with state committee members and engaging them and giving them guidance on creating the fairest rules possible.
Yeah, and also, of course, the alternative being, if we hadn't done anything, the alternative is we lose 80% of our national delegates, and we vote in a primary administered by Democrats, by rules crafted by Democrats, and even being voted in by Democrats. So that was the offer that was on the table if we hadn't done something about it. So there you go.
Yep. And and I've heard people say, "Oh, why don't we have an open caucus, let more people in?" But then Democrats would be, and basically the red carpet would be rolled out for them to come and meddle in our caucuses. And they tend to be more well organized than we are. So I think limiting it to precinct delegates was necessary. And we've got a pretty good framework, I think, that we can work on moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything to say about the district caucuses, they're not going to have Democrats voting in them, because there ain't too many Democrats that are registered as Republican precinct delegates. Mm-hmm. So there you go. A couple other quick follow-ups. It seems like a lot of the opposition to this seemed to come from two places. One was people who simply despise Christina Caramo and the whole shift in leadership in the GOP and just want to use any pretext they have. And we saw this from some of these groups that were attacking this decision, or groups that have just been throwing bombs at the GOP this entire time. And there's just an animosity there. That's just the way it's going to be. And then the other thing too, I think, is there's people there's people who see that this is going to have a political impact on the outcome. The question of, well, is this going to benefit Trump or is this going to benefit DeSantis? One of the more outspoken critics of this was someone who very much supports DeSantis and believes that the perception is the GOP precinct delegates are all a bunch of Trumpsters. But contrary to that, there is, and again, the bottom line is there's no clear evidence one way or the other what the impact will be. But I noticed this tweet from Robert Barnes, the same Robert Barnes we just saw in that clip talking about the Trump indictment, which we'll come back to in a moment. But Barnes is a very big Trump supporter, and he makes the point that in Wisconsin, polling shows that crossover votes in the primary from Democrats would be voting for Trump by a margin of 73-2. So if that's the case, then Trump would do well in an open primary if Democrats are going to cross over to vote for him. But the precinct delegates are going to be voting, and if they're, as people allege, overwhelmingly Trump voters, then what's the difference? The difference is the national delegates we get back is the difference.
And we saw at the last convention that Trump heavily endorsed Matt DePerno and was pushing him hard. The delegates disagreed with Trump and went with Christina Caramo instead. Right. So it shows that the delegates are not, Trump doesn't have a monolithic hold on the delegates. They're going to be able to think for themselves and come to the best determination over who the strongest conservative candidate is. I know DeSantis has been making that case. I don't necessarily buy it, but he's been making that case throughout the country that he's more conservative than Trump and trying to outflank him on the right on, a wide variety of issues like abortion, culture war type stuff. So he's going to be able to make that case to the delegates. And I don't think that it's necessarily sewn up for Trump just because it's being handled by delegates.
Yeah, a lot can happen in 7 months. And As I said last week, and the great thing is in either outcome, the two clear, well, certainly Trump is the clear front runner and DeSantis is the clear runner up at this point. The other candidates who are the neocon rhinos are getting no traction whatsoever anywhere. And between Trump and DeSantis, we have two fine candidates, either of whom I'd be happy to vote for as the nominee. So I think all's well that ends well.
Absolutely. So we'll take the win, and hopefully it'll give us a little bit more unity and happiness and camaraderie moving forward.
I think so. Well, anyway, since we already talked about last Sunday's show in the first 10 minutes, but we're having the show tonight because we have a lot of new stuff to cover that we didn't have time to get to last Sunday. Starting with, of course, the Trump indictment, which was made official yesterday, but we knew about going into the weekend. And we just heard Robert Barnes' take about all this. And as I said in my email blast we did earlier today, I mean, that's the essence of this, is that Trump is the president. He is the sole source of classification. And if the deep state is claiming that Trump didn't follow their procedures, then the quote unquote democracy we live in is meaningless, because now the deep state has control over the executive, even though the people did not elect anybody in the deep state. They only elected Donald J. Trump, the president. But I don't know, do you have any further thoughts on this? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think that the reason why it's BS is because no one can really point to the specific document. No one is talking about what Trump actually did. It's just, he had some documents, and they're national security, and Trump hurt the troops, and he broke the law. And it's always vague in terms of, what are these documents? What why were these documents classified? Why did the National Archive need to have them? And what's peculiar is, I think it was journalist Michael Tracy who made the point that, the ridiculous argument that, if Trump had just given the documents back, if he had just rolled over to the deep state and did what he was told, none of this would ever happen. That sort of argument kind of admits that there was nothing criminal about holding these documents in the first place, that this was just some sort of misunderstanding that Trump stupidly reacted to in a hostile way, and so he has 35 counts and several under the Espionage Act. So none of this stuff makes sense. Jack Smith has a huge record of prosecutions that overreached and were thrown out in the courts, even by liberal judges. This probably won't be held by a liberal judge in Florida. So I don't see these charges sticking, but there's going to be more charges too. They're really just throwing everything against the wall, hoping something sticks, and hoping that they can get Trump in jail so that he can't campaign. They know if Trump's out there next year, presuming he's the candidate for the Republicans, he's going to be lighting rocket fuel on people, and he can really, the energy and the enthusiasm from those big crazy rallies can really move mountains, as we saw in 2016. I think we would have seen in 2020 if all the fraud didn't happen. So Trump's the ultimate wild card. He's the one who the deep state is terrified of. So they're throwing all this stuff at him, hoping that it can, at the very least, hang it around his head as an albatross on the campaign trail, and divert his time, money, resources away from campaigning throughout 2024.
Yeah. And one thing that Barnes was saying just after that clip ended, actually, was that I lost my train of thought on this one. It was regarding, as he was saying, he was disputing Mark Milley, claiming that the U.S. was that it was Trump that wanted to go to war with Iran until Milley stopped him, and Trump was debunking that fact. But then, what was it? Barnes was going on to say something to that very point about. Well, I'll tell you what. When I come back to that thought, I'll return to it. But I want to make another point about this too, which is that I remember what I was going to say. Barnes went on to say that Trump didn't retain those documents. He had copies of them. So the whole notion that he could have just returned them was gibberish, because they didn't need to return them. The government already had them. So it doesn't matter whether Trump had a copy for himself, as was his right as president. But the other thing, the other point to make, and this goes to the fact that these were comments that Trump made to the media, is the stunning hypocrisy of the mass media themselves, because they handle classified documents all the time that they're getting leaks from Washington every day. And for them to suddenly pontificate that, oh my gosh, Trump leaked a national security document that was classified, when the media constantly reports on information they got from classified document leaks all the time. And they happily report it because most of it's deep state propaganda in the first place. And that's what they're doing, is laundering deep state talking points under color of this is classified information. And that's why this is so important. They don't give a crap about that. If they actually cared about the secrecy of all these documents, they wouldn't be posting them. but they don't mind because it serves their agenda, and that's all there is to it. And
well,
again,
look at how they treat Julian Assange versus how they treat Alexander Vindman, the CIA guy who I even forget what he leaked. It was the phone call related to Ukraine that supposedly was a smoking gun that went nowhere. So look at how they treat a hand-picked deep State Department, CIA fake whistleblower versus how they treat a real whistleblower who exposes war crimes and corporate criminality like Julian Assange. So you see the double standards there. You're seeing the double standard for Trump. Trump really should have pardoned Assange.
Yeah,
I bet he's kicking himself. I bet he's kicking himself for not doing that right about now. But hopefully
he was being blackmailed by Mike Pompeo.
Well, wasn't he being told that?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mitch McConnell. That's right. Mitch McConnell was blackmailing him over the second sham impeachment, which is another terrible crime the media is covering up.
He was basically told that if he had done that, they would have voted to impeach him and have tried to destroy him completely. I believe that was the story as to one of the major reasons why he didn't do it. But now they're using the same thing they went after Assange with the Espionage Act. Going after Trump, it's completely ridiculous. But there's, it's very terrifying that there's this mass of tens of millions of people who don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about what the precedent this might set for future cases. They just want to see Trump's head on a platter. They don't care whether or not he's committed a crime or not. They think he's the evil orange bad man, and they want him to rot. And they want, basically total socialism, communism, totalitarianism moving forward. So this is kind of the Orwellian Soviet style regime, coup regime as I call it, that's taken place that's taken the place of the Constitution, which I think was completely eliminated after the 2020 election.
Yeah, they don't care if they damage rule of law. They don't care if it's an injustice. They don't care if it damages the public's perception of the justice system as a whole. It's anything to get Trump. And they're destroying the foundations of our entire constitutional republic doing this. And the fact that every Republican in America, especially the elected ones, aren't screaming about how unjust this is, really says a lot about how completely compromised and even traitorous some of these Republicans are. Speaking of that, by the way,
yes.
Oh, actually, before I move on to talking about some other Republican traitors, real quick, Mark Price asked, would the Michigan GOP help local candidates in this year's local elections? Well, I think, Mark, the two issues with that is, number one, the state party's job is to win the statewide races, and that's going to mean the U.S. Senate seat. That's going to mean there's some judicial seats, there's some university board seats, and of course, they're supposed to do everything they can to support the nominee for the president of the United States. And I hope they do put their full resources into that. It's supposed to be the county parties that take care of the local campaigns. And of course, the other problem is, I don't know if the state party has enough resources to spare to help out the local campaigns. But yeah, traditionally, that's the job of the local parties. Do you want to add anything on that, Shane?
Yeah, I think it's mostly the local party, the district party that you'd expect to help in local races. And I think, that's something that you should be trying to organize, door knock teams in your own community. Those are the races that you can have the most impact in. You don't need a ton of money to win a local race. You just need, a candidate who's willing to walk a ton of doors, and a team that's willing to, be reliable volunteers and help, not just on doors, but on making phone calls, on scheduling events, and raising money and other things that are so important for winning at the local level. So I wouldn't expect the state party to get involved in that, but you might get some support from the county or district party with regards to the local races.
Yep. Anyway, so getting back to Republican traitors, another follow-up to something we talked about briefly on Sunday's show, which is that the impasse in the U.S. House of Representatives is over. And Apparently, Kevin McCarthy has gotten the caucus back in line, and they are going back to the normal orders there. So the story, I got a story here, a comment on this, and this is from a mass media, left-wing mass media source. It says it's a story, but it's also completely editorialized. But the point being, but they've got a point here, so we can take a look at this. Kevin McCarthy's temporary success now sets up a final defeat down the road. And here's the story that what McCarthy struck a deal was yesterday was that conservatives will stop voting against the procedural motions to bring bills to the floor in exchange for writing spending bills at budget levels from 2 years ago, which, as the author of this snidely remarks, is something that probably won't pass the Senate. So what's going to happen there? What was all this for? Who knows? And there you can read the whole story on your own if you want. But there's a lot of sneering at the Freedom Caucus over this. If these expectations seem unrealistic, it's because they are. But that's what these stupid Freedom Caucus members are insisting upon. That's what McCarthy has agreed to do, at least for now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the U.S. House. I'm not holding my breath, folks. I think at best this turns into a long-term revolt against Kevin McCarthy and his caucus, who, let's remember, broke his promises to get on board the speakership, also broke his promises to get Republicans elected. Saying he was against funding the Ukraine war, and now saying, "Oh, I just lied about that to get the majority. We're totally going to support the Ukraine war and send more taxpayer dollars to Ukraine." So, I mean, how many more promises can he break before the Freedom Caucus stop taking him at his word?
Yeah, I mean, shouldn't they do the motion to vacate? I mean, can't they do that anytime to kind of mount an insurgency against McCarthy? I don't know exactly what they're waiting for. Obviously, he lied. I think they muscled a few measly concessions out of him. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene should be ashamed of how much she carried water for McCarthy when it was obvious that, he's no different than Paul Ryan or, John Boehner or Eric Cantor or the other, people who were handpicked to lead the Republicans in the House in the past several years. So, it's the more of the same, more of the swamp. And although we have probably more solid conservative reps at the congressional level than we've had, in a long time, it's still not nearly enough to actually change the toxic, rotten culture of Washington, D.C., sadly.
Yeah, the other thing that caught my attention too is that the bill that they held up Washington over was going to be done what's called a closed rule, which means there's no amendments allowed. And McCarthy, one of his promises to the Freedom Caucus was that they weren't going to do that they were going to have open amendments on bills. And that's one of the most important things that lawmakers in the minority can do in Washington, and even in the minority within their own party can do, is get recorded roll call votes, which are absolutely critical, because that's how we can actually go after these rhinos, is when they put themselves on a record. I saw this story. I was going to cover this last Sunday, and we didn't have time to cover it. It didn't fit. But this was one of the stories we're going to look at on last Sunday's show. And that was, it's now an outdated story about the temporary shutdown in the House. But this is the paragraph I want to draw people's attention to. Republicans feared that centrists could rebel by voting with Democrats to delay a vote on an abortion bill that would codify the Hyde Amendments. And what the Hyde Amendment is prohibiting taxpayer funding for abortions at the federal level, saying the federal government cannot use taxpayer money to subsidize abortions. In other words, there's Republicans who are not only pro-abortion, but pro-taxpayer funding of abortion. And I want them on the record on this. I want to know who are these Republicans who not only don't have a problem with abortion, which there's room for opinions on issues, but taxpayer funding of abortion is something that they got through. That's why it's called the Hyde Amendment, is because there was a time not long ago when even Democrats had to concede that making taxpayers pay for other people's abortions was a gross violation of people's moral conscience, that the money that the government steals from you, your tax money, can be spent killing babies.
Pretty despicable, but does not surprise me that Republicans, a lot of these people are just, Democrats who realize that they could win by running with an R next to their name. I think we have a lot of those in Michigan too. So, and that's the type of people the establishment love. That's who they will shower with money. They will make it as easy as possible for them to get elected. They will cover for them and, never be held accountable. And, they'll be career politicians for the rest of their lives because those are the types who will go along to get along and will never rock the boat. So they get all the money in their coffers and all the rewards that are completely undeserved.
Yeah. Speaking of getting rhinos elected, you have a story for us this week about a former governor in Michigan who suddenly decided, even though as recently as last week, I heard somebody tell me, Rick Snyder really hates politics. But what's going on, Shane?
Okay, well, I sent you the story to your email, so
Okay.
you can pull that up. I'll start talking in the meantime. So we got former governor Rick Snyder, the guy who left office in disgrace after handling the Flint water situation so poorly, the man who endorsed Joe Biden in 2020 and rallied Republicans to get behind Biden. So the blood is on his hands for the Biden regime and the damage that they're doing to the country. You would think that someone like that would be run out of the party on a rail, but no, he's coming back as the hero. The House Republican Campaign Committee, they are the fundraising arm of the Michigan State House. They have named Rick Snyder as one of their lead fundraisers heading into the 2024 election. And Adam's going to be pulling up a article written by Nolan Finley of the Detroit News. Nolan Finley.
You know what, Shane? I actually don't see that email from you. I don't know what's going on with this, but I do have. I found another article which might not. It's not the same thing, but it's something similar. This is looks like Christina Caramo blasting House Republicans for fundraising with Rick Snyder. So I don't know if
that's weird. That's weird. I'm sending you emails and they're not going through, so that's kind of weird.
Kind of I don't know, man.
But
we'll figure this out after the show, I guess. Or you know what? I see you know what? Can you post the link in the chat and I'll see it that way?
Post it in there.
Okay, cool. All right, do that and I'll pull it right up. All right, here we go.
Yeah. So Nolan Finley, the hack of the Detroit News, the never Trumper, the Bush era conservative, the token conservative on the liberal rag. He said, "Welcome back, Rick Snyder. We're so great to see you. You're going to be fundraising to support the type of respectable Republicans, that the type of people who underneath Rick Snyder implemented Obamacare, supported Common Core, supported gas tax, supported internet sales tax, supported record spending coming from the House." So that's the type of respectable Republicanism we need to get back to. And if it's not bad enough that Rick Snyder is the co-fundraising chair, look at who the other fundraising chair is. And yes, you've highlighted that. Bill Parfett of Kalamazoo. And Bill Parfett, a super rich guy. Snyder is
super rich pal, he says. Yeah.
Super, yeah. I mean, gotta give Nolan Finley credit. He's very arrogantly an elitist, and loves rubbing it in the faces of the rabble, who's really in charge. From his privileged media post. But Bill Parfett, he took it one step further. You can argue that Trump was so bad, so the tweets he posted, his authoritarianism, he's so rude and crude and divisive that, I couldn't support him. But Bill Parfett took it to another level. He actually supported Gretchen Whitmer in 2022. He wouldn't support Tudor Dixon, who, I thought was pretty conservative, but not to the extent that she couldn't get support from some mainstream figures. The DeVosses were behind her big time. Not a fan of the DeVosses, but that just kind of shows that, this wasn't an extremist candidate. Despite the fact of, the BS made up by Whitmer's ads, this was a candidate who was much more of a mainstream conservative. She got, cross-section, broad support across the board from various different groups. So that from the Trump right to the more moderate right. But Parfait still supported Gretchen Whitmer and wanted Whitmer in and rallied Republicans to support her last year. And he's going to be fundraising for the HRCC. So this is a slap in the face of the base. They are spitting in our faces. They are saying, we don't value you. We are crushing you. We're going to put our money behind destroying you. And it really is emblematic of something else that Nolan Finley talked about, and I'm going to send you another link about this, Adam.
Sure.
Another thing that Nolan Finley talked about, where he brought up that the establishment was striking back last year, that he bragged that a shadow party was coming up through the Michigan Opportunity Alliance to pool their money and support only the candidates who stood for quote unquote good government and fiscal conservatism, which of course means going along with the establishment and following the orders of the special interests and not rocking the boat. And this was led by former state party chair Bobby Shostak and West Michigan businessman Doug DeVos. So the old GOP money coming in and doing what they can to squeeze conservative Republicans out.
Yeah, it strikes me that they say candidates who stand for good government and fiscal conservatism. I was just talking to some people today. Someone from Americans for Prosperity was approaching our party about working with them, our local party. And I was talking about how, what AFP is, and, they're basically a Koch brothers funded operation, which will be good on fiscal conservative issues, but will completely neglect social issues, be terrible about immigration. And there's so many organizations like this, like the Club for Growth, the Chambers of Commerce. These are the standard bearers that are, without exception, rhinos. And one of the things we find within the GOP, where, like on the Rescue Michigan scorecard, for example, the votes where there's the most dissension in the GOP, oftentimes, is these corporate welfare deals. And like we saw with the state Senate, when they passed they voted against the budget, but then they voted to give it immediate effect for some of the budget bills that they were doing because they got carve-outs. And that's very common because a lot of these lawmakers want that money. They want that special interest money, and they're going to go after it. But I had a couple of thoughts on this. First, with respect to Rick Snyder, let's remember, literally in the last 5 months, the Democrats have destroyed every single piece of Rick Snyder's legacy on anything of any value at all. They are systematically destroying every single thing, from the emergency manager law to right to work, to prevailing wage, even. All the things, the A to F that Rick Snyder signed, all the things that were Rick Snyder's signature issues, the Democrats absolutely destroyed. And how'd they get the power to do that? Because the GOP establishment decided to have a civil war with the grassroots, try to sabotage our candidates, sabotage our nominee for governor. And this is what their outcome is. And Rick Snyder is going along with this agenda because he hates the GOP grassroots, the conservatives, more than he hates the people who destroyed his legacy as governor. Think about that, folks. How insane is that? And what he wants to do now is to do it again. And to that point, to the point about Rick Snyder has super rich friends who are going to fund rhino candidates just the same way the DeVosses also do. Leads me to one other point I want to make about the grassroots. And some of you guys might take this hard, but let me just be blunt about this. You guys are cheap when it comes to fundraising and donating. Working with my county GOP, people feel uncomfortable asking for $100, for asking about it. And, folks, I drive the cheapest car of everybody who's in my county GOP, and I can donate thousands of dollars to the county GOP. If you care about this country, you should give all that you can, because that's what's on the line, is the future of this country. And the legacy of your family is being annihilated right now by Democrats. And I can't stand when people nickel and dime over, oh my God, you guys are always asking me for $20 or even $50. It's like, Yeah, well, the opposition's throwing in millions and billions of dollars, and collectively, if we all did put in, then we'd be able to do more things. We're all limited by how much resources we have, and that's the advantage that the rhinos have. So if you want to beat them, you got to outcompete them financially. It's an important thing.
Yep, and Adam, I sent you a couple other links that kind of describe. I brought up earlier, HRCC now fundraised by Snyder and Bill Parfett, the main fundraisers. So look to see where this money is coming from and where it's going.
Okay.
So yes, so let's see what you pull up first, so we can kind of go through that. So okay, so who received the money in the last cycle? Well, you see. Jack O'Malley, probably the biggest rhino. He lost. He ran a terrible campaign, distanced himself from conservatism and got his ass kicked in a relatively red district. Then you see other names up there, pretty rhino-ish names up there. But you also see some people who, are solid or could be solid or aren't rhinos. I see James DeSana, Jamie Thompson, Mike Aiello, Michelle Smith, some others on there. And they receive substantial contributions from HRCC as well. So does every dollar that HRCC gives to a candidate, is that bad money? No. But you got to understand, these hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations, this money is constantly being held over the heads of these different lawmakers, so that if a conservative receives hundreds of thousands of dollars from HRCC and gets over the finish line just barely, what are they incentivized to do? Are they incentivized to stand for principle, or are they going to feel beholden to this money power? Are they going to feel beholden to the likes of Rick Snyder and Bill Parfett, who could snap their fingers and take all that money away from them and yank the carpet out from under them and send them packing? So this money is always, being held over the heads of different lawmakers that if they don't play ball, if they don't do the bidding of the special interests, that money could dry up, or that money could go to a primary challenger in the next election. So there's always these strings attached, and the money is used to control conservatives more than it is to defeat Democrats. And I could go for a long time into it's exactly how this process doomed the Republican majority last year with the whole Matt Hall versus Matt Maddock thing. Well, I think we'll save that for another day. Yeah. Let's look at the contributors now of HRCC.
One more comment. Just one more comment to make about this. Like the top recipient, Jack O'Malley, gets almost $1 million. If Patriots maxed out, which is like 1,000 and change to their candidates, you take less than 1,000 people in a whole district of 90,000 people to raise that kind of money all by themselves. And money isn't everything. You can win a campaign outspent 2 to 1, 3 to 1, even 4 to 1 if you spend it smartly. But you can't win when you don't have a certain baseline amount of support you need to be able to pay staff, to be able to buy an office, to be able to print literature, to be able to mobilize people on election day. Anyway, all right. You want me to look at the payments section? Here we go.
Actually, that's go up. It's contributors. It's up.
I see. Contributors. Here we go. Yep.
So yeah, you see who gave the most to HRCC. You see the former House leader, Jason Wentworth, who's been involved in all kinds of different lobbyist scandal, giving taxpayer money to cronies and to Democrats who he's in bed with.
Matt Hall, who lost majority.
The speaker who lost majority, Matt Hall, who ran HRCC over the last cycle and spent it to win over people, to give people to people who he knew would support him for House Speaker, rather than in 50-50 seats with conservatives who might not have supported him for House Speaker, which in turn helped lead to the loss of the majority. Then you see the DeVos family. You see, Senate minority leader. I think he's a Senate minority leader, Eric Nesbitt, who's been around. He's been in the pockets of the energy companies for a long time now. The Boji family, another very rich, very prominent establishment backing family. Their name is
they own the skyscraper in Lansing, where the Senate has some hearings.
Yeah, they
like the biggest hearing room.
Remember the Senate, building scandal where all that money was funneled into the Bogies, and they put the Bogies name on it, so just a slap in our faces. And then you see some names of people who might be angling to be the next top dog. You see Luke Meerman.
What they're doing, what they do is they send the lobbyists are being directed by the speaker and by the HRCC to give their money to leadership first, and then secondly to the committee chairs who they pick so that they have control over the caucus. That's the way this game works. And then these people are all basically just transmitting money they get from lobbyists into the campaigns so that the next crop of incoming Republican freshmen will be loyal to leadership. And of course, the process works the exact same way for Democrats.
Yep. So this is how they control it with their slush funds. And look at the names of those people. I'm sure one of them will be the next speaker. Andrew Beeler, Thomas Albert. Michael Mueller, who was the guy who turned on us at corporate welfare and screwed us there. So you see a lot of names of the bad guys. Bunch of DeVosses. So it's just what you'd expect to see, and it's just all played out here. And when people talk about the rhinos and they want to go after people who they agree with on 95% of all issues, that is such a waste of time when you should be looking at this. This is the heart of the power structure. This is how they screw us. This is how the uniparty, buys allegiances, and how they force the hand of squishy moderate Republicans and good conservatives in many cases who feel the need to play ball with this system, because look at all the money going into it. And look at the beer and wine wholesalers pack. So they're
one of the committee all to themselves practically. The Reg Reform Committee. In Lansing, they'll just tell you openly, this is the liquor committee, and it's great to be on it because you'll get tons of money from the beer and wine wholesalers. That's the way it goes.
So it's just an orgy of money from all these rich interests, and in Michigan it's a little bit worse. In every state, there's all these different lobbyists and these different groups, but in Michigan, we're the corruption capital of the entire country, and here it's particularly grotesque. And there's it's going on at the national level. Senator Mitch McConnell was running the Senate Leadership Fund in 2022, and he deprived money from Don Bolduc, from Blake Masters, from the lady whose name I can't pronounce in Alaska, who was going up against Murkowski. So these people all had chances of winning, and he took the money out of these races where he could have won and gave it to the rhino Murkowski in Alaska so she could fend off the anti-establishment challenger. The Republican was going to win in that race. He put the money to make sure his preferred Republican won, and then at least 2 other races were lost because he yanked the money out of those races. Good America First candidates. So that's how it works at every level. And the only way to defeat this is by creating new organizations and finding new sources of revenue. That's why Rescue Michigan is so important. That's why what I'm doing with the Grand New Party PAC is so important, because we want to incentivize people to actually do the right thing, so that when you do the right thing, you're going to have enough money and resources to succeed and stay in office. You're not going to get steamrolled like so many good people have, and they're obviously going to try to do to certain people next year now that Snyder is in charge. So it's not enough that the MIGOP, the takeover the districts level, the county level, the Patriots, getting into action, becoming organized as precinct delegates. That's causing a huge effect. But that needs to cascade over into the legislature, or we're just going to keep getting rolled in each election. We have to do what we've done at the MIGOP level, at the district GOP level, at the county GOP level. We have to do that in the legislature, or we are screwed. So that's why we have to build the alternative. We have to build the infrastructure to do that. And Trump, at the national level, you saw when Trump got elected, there was only so much he could do because it was just one man. He didn't have a massive infrastructure behind him. The rhinos did, the Democrats did, the deep state did. And now look what's happening. Look at how many charges he's facing. He's looking at potential jail time. Then they're doing everything they can to try to stop him from getting back in 2024. So we have to learn the right lessons. learn from our mistakes, and build that infrastructure, support these candidates, support new organizations. We need more tentacles from the anti-establishment that can fight back against this, monster that has been created over the course of many decades of just nonstop rampant corruption. We have to be smart in how we're fighting back against it.
Yeah, and getting involved in primary campaigns is absolutely critical, or else Rick Snyder will be selecting your Republican nominees for the state house in the upcoming cycle. So absolutely, that's critical, and that also includes recruiting the right candidates for these seats. All right, before we get on to the next topic, we are streaming live on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, and even Twitter. So if you like this kind of content, remember to like and share and subscribe and hit that button. And we do often read comments live on stream, so make sure you go ahead and do that. Anyway, some other news this week. We just did an email blast yesterday about this new tranche of bills that was introduced just last week and are already going to the floor. They may have been voted out today, actually, if not tomorrow, most likely. And that is a whole package of election fraud bills, House bills. It's, I think, 4695 through 4702. There's a whole bunch of these. I did cover these in the email, but just to recap some of the things. Number one, and let me pull up some of these bills right now. In fact, hold on one sec. Let me pull them up here. 4695. Let me get my screen going. First bill we have, this is for early voting, mandating that there will be 72 hours of early voting at a minimum over a 9-day period, which makes it so it's virtually impossible for volunteers to be involved as poll challengers and performing that critical check on elections. That's what that was all about, of course. That was in proposal 2. Does not mean the legislature has any obligation to pass any legislation to implement it. So any Republican voting for this, and they say, well, the Constitution says we have to do this. No, it doesn't. Nothing in the Constitution compels the action of any state lawmaker, period. Maybe courts will try to implement it, but it doesn't mean the legislature has any obligation to go along with it. But that's one of the bills. And some of these things, by the way, that we're going to look at are not things that are mandated by Proposal 2. The absentee ballot drop box implementation bill. Let's take a look at this, which, as you can see, has now passed the House. So they did get it all done today. And they have actually struck out language about security for drop boxes, which tells you exactly how concerned they are about election fraud. They've actually crossed off language about requiring them to be bolted into the ground. Let me see if I can find that spot in the bill. Let's see here. Well, they put this back in the new draft. Well, that's something. For an absent voter drop box not ordered installed before October, must use monitoring. So there is that, but only for drop boxes that were not ordered or installed. So new ones. Not old ones. Those can continue to be unsecured. So there's that. Where's that bit about? Yeah. So they crossed off the language here. The Dropbox must be securely locked and bolted to the ground or to another stationary object. That's been taken out. So again, you can see just from the language that they're putting in, they have no obligation to do any of that. They're deliberately removing safeguards against election fraud. Then we have the definition of identification for election purposes. Nothing about this in Proposal 2. It allows student ID cards to be used as IDs, which don't have any security features that your more modern or even postmodern state issued IDs have.
What if you're a foreign exchange student or something?
You get a student ID. Yep. And they also now have a provision allowing current photo identification card issued by a local government. I am not aware of local governments issuing photo IDs except for their employees, but they did put that in there. Maybe they mean library cards for all I know. But there you go. So they now allow, student IDs. Doesn't have to be from a college even, but that's in there too. So again, for what purpose other than weakening voter ID? That's in 4698. Something else in that bill I know someone's going to talk about in a moment here, but we'll come to that in a second. Permanent mail-in ballot voters. There's some implementation language in here. I don't recall if this particular bill is among the worst of them. I know that this one has some interesting things in here for signature matching, which now says if a signature is obviously fake, they give the voter until 3 days after the election to submit another absentee ballot with a cured signature. So that's in that one. And then finally, we have a bill to increase the size of precincts from up to 3,000 voters that it is now to up to 5,000 voters. This is all part of the game of consolidating the whole election system. Trying to incentivize local governments to turn it over to their counties is a big part of this. Having more voters per poll worker, because line pressure is one tactic that they can use. And having fewer staff involved in the overall process. So you have fewer eyes in the system overall. Again, no reason to do any of this other than to make it easier to cheat in elections. And then just laying it all bare. And I have no doubt in my mind oh, look at that. There's some Republicans that voted for this. We'll be talking about that on Sunday's live stream, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see which Republicans voted for these election fraud facilitation bills. Someone's got some negative exposure coming. I'll tell you that for sure. But the other thing I was going to mention, I think we'll see it in this bill here. Yes, we will. There's something else that's going on in the legislature that, unless you're a bill nerd like me, you would never notice this stuff. But one of the things that they do in Lansing all the time is they have an agency called the Legislative Services Bureau that actually writes these bills that the legislators vote on. So they say, I want this to do something, something. An attorney at the Legislative Services Bureau writes that bill. And these attorneys, by the way, and I'll tell you why this is important in a moment, have an attorney-client relationship with each of these lawmakers' offices. So leadership can't ask the attorney, what did the lawmaker tell you to do with this? They can't do that. It violates attorney-client privilege unless they get the permission from the lawmaker. Anyway, one of the things that they do in LSB is they have a whole series of conventions that they change over time. And you often see in bills this minor stuff, like you see the word person crossed off and the word individual written in. And why are they doing that? Well, sometimes it's because the court says it's clearer that, maybe it's the corporate personhood thing, that this makes it clear that we're talking about an individual human. So that's why they do it that way. And you'll see things like that. They cross out the word shall and write in the word must. And it's all legislative housekeeping. It's just policies that they have. One of the things they've been doing in all of these bills, and we saw it in a bill we just saw, a Democrat bill, is they're crossing off the word his or her, and he and she, he or she, and writing in the individual. They're doing this in bills all the time. And here's a bill. This is actually one of the constitutional carry bills. I prefer to call it right to carry. I think it's shorter and clearer, but for some reason people go with constitutional carry. And you can see it's introduced by primary sponsors Angela Regas, one of the most outspoken conservatives in the House. You've got the usual suspects on there, Matt Maddox, Steve Carra, the conservatives, essentially, and some more mainstream Republicans as well. And, of course, it's sent to the Government Operations Committee, which is where you send bills to not get a hearing. But here, too, you see them doing the same thing. And, again, individual, from person to individual, nothing wrong with that. But then you see them using this gender-fluid language. His or her becomes the individual's home, not his or her home, not a place to purchase his or her home, but the individual's home. And here's the thing. Lawmakers in Lansing, even though they have an agency that writes the bills for them, is the lawmaker, not LSB. So if a lawmaker says to LSB, I don't want your housekeeping language in my bill, I don't want you putting gender fluid language in my bill, they can direct the Bureau to do that. They can direct the attorney to do that. And the attorney can't snitch to leadership about that. So not the biggest deal in the world, but I would just say, because these are the laws that are going to be on the books. This one, not this term, but maybe some future term, is Republican lawmakers need to tell LSB that we're not abiding by the gender neutral directives that they surely got from leadership. They surely got this from the Democrats' office. This is what we demand you do. Well, LSB reports to each individual lawmaker as their attorney, not to leadership. So Republicans need to tell leadership you need to tell LSB to knock it off, in my opinion. So just putting this out there for any members in Lansing that might be watching tonight. So there you go. That's my rant for the night on that topic.
Well, I don't know. I'll just bring this up because I saw it, I don't know, a day or so ago,
Yeah,
that the people of Hamtramck, which has become more Muslim in recent years, they
yeah,
banned the showing of pride flags, and really all, I think, flags that represent sexuality or religion or personal beliefs on city property. So now it'll just be the American flag um, that will be shown, in on the city council or wherever else. You've been seeing all these different pride flags, and always including now the transgender part of it that they've added in
yeah,
recent years. So it's when they uh, put that flag up, they are explicitly endorsing the chemical castration and mutilation of children and butchering their genitals. So that's what the pride flag is all about. So banning it from public buildings is a great first step. I'm sure it'll be challenged by the ACLU and everything else, because nowadays you're only free to submit. You don't have religious freedom. You don't have the freedom to reject these sort of barbaric practices. You can only submit to them. But the
yeah.
fact that local communities are taking action against it is a great first step, and we need to see much more of that, especially during this month, so-called Pride Month.
Yeah.
We need people standing up and rebuking the excesses of this bizarre agenda.
Yeah. By the way, happy Flag Day, everybody. And happy birthday, Donald Trump. It's his birthday today. Some other stuff, and let's pick up the pace a little bit because I still have some more topics to discuss. We're at the top of the hour now again. Some new bills have gotten onto our lawmaker scorecard. We have a bill in the Senate that got a vote in both chambers to make hairstyle a civil right. And you see a lot of Republicans in the House and the Senate voted in favor of this. And it may seem like a small thing, but tampering with the civil rights law, and there's a lot of other bills the Democrats are pushing on these things too. They want to make ethnicity a civil right in contrast with race. And this is a bill to ban discrimination of hairstyles, which all these bills invite lawsuits. All these bills invite lawsuits because, and how do you litigate this? Is someone going to not get hired because they have a hairstyle? Are they going to sue and say you have a company that's this big, you don't have this many people in it with cornrows? I mean, this is inviting lawsuit abuse, is all it is about. And it's also, the reason they're doing this is just for Democrat messaging. You see, I tagged this bill leftism, but look at all these rhinos that voted for this. The usuals: McBroom, Victory, Bellino in the Senate, and of course the conservatives are voting against it. And then in the House, same story for the most part. Although actually, I see a lot of conservatives on that side. The only ones that voted against that were Cara, Fox, Maddox, Regas, Frisky, Shriver, and Hoadley, and that's it. So this is one of those bills I like to key vote because it tells you this is one of those bills that draws a real sharp contrast among the Republican caucus. When they think it's something that's too minor, no one's going to care about this one. I want lawmakers thinking we might key vote anything. And this is one of those things that policy-wise might not be a huge deal in the long run, but it's a dangerous precedent that they're normalizing the tampering with our civil rights law. That's what this bill does.
Yeah, this bill shows which lawmakers are playing go along to get along, which lawmakers will support abject stupidity just because they feel like it's easier to do so than to not. And this is just more made up oppression, fake victimhood. This is, racism has become fake racism, and hate hoaxes and all that kind of stuff has become an industry in America. So, America, oppression has declined so much in America that, these victim groups, these, BLM style groups, they have to go out hunting for fake types of oppression so that they can play the victim and get more entitlements under the law. And it'll never be enough. They'll have some new stupid thing that they've conjured up that'll, allow, more, hucksters to file fake lawsuits and extract money out of the business community and extract and do cost the taxpayer more money, and so this is just horrible, and the Republicans especially who voted yes on this should be ashamed of themselves. And speaking of shame, to just today, It was muscled through. It was muscled through the Senate a while ago. It was muscled through the House today. That Juneteenth will now be considered a statewide holiday, and a bunch of people will get the day off. And if you don't know, Juneteenth is, does have some historical ramifications, particularly in Texas.
Yeah, but as a holiday, it was just conceived by Democrats. It was a thing they conjured up to make more angst about slavery and call for reparations. And at the end of the day, a state holiday, not in the sense that the legislature all the time passes things to designate such and such a holiday, but a taxpayer-funded day off for state employees. There's a cost to this, and it's about, I think, $4 million that taxpayers now pay for state employees to take a day off of work, and it's all because of Democrat race baiting. I'll find the vote on that in just a moment here.
And it's even more sinister than that, because the BLM activists, the far left activists, the modern Democrats, they want to float Juneteenth as their replacement day for the 4th of July. It's all a part of the pseudo history that was conjured up in the widely discredited 1619 Project, totally made up by an affirmative action academic who made it up. She hates white people. I forget her name. Who cares what her name is? But just blatantly anti-white, blatantly racist, awful person made this up. But now, you see it. They did a big special on ABC about it. It's being promoted as the new history that's replacing the authentic history of the founding fathers and the glory of 1776. So that's what the Republicans have sold out. And I would like to thank Senator Jim Runstead,
the only one in the
Josh. Yep, reps Josh Shriver, Matt Maddock. I believe who are the rest of them? Steve Carra.
I'm pulling up the other one. It's 4457. Let me see if I can find it here.
And there's one more. So thank them for and Neil Frisky. Thank you for doing the right thing here, because what they're doing with Juneteenth is.
You said it just happened today. That's why I don't have it, because I don't have the votes for today. But you just read them off. The few, the very few. 5
people who stood against this, really anti-white blood libel that's being pushed through the elevation of Juneteenth as a national holiday. So it's a sinister agenda behind this, and you see how Republicans will not stand strong. They have already surrendered, and that they will not stand for the American people. They will when all the busts of the founding fathers are ripped down, they'll be silent as well. Cowards.
Yep. Oh, look, Will Bruck is now voting again. That's interesting. William Bruck has a vote in the House. Haven't seen that for a while. This is William Bruck's voting record. These are Bill's. Here's his voting record. This is it. Look at all those. Voted for the speaker on the first day, and then didn't vote on any of these bills whatsoever. That's because he's an active duty military, which you might think is kind of a problem if you're an elected lawmaker to be on active duty. I don't know why he didn't think about that before he ran for office, but that's what he did. Look at this. The first bill he voted on when he got back to Lansing, the very first thing was voting to make hairstyle a protected civil right.
Wow.
Yep. He'll have a fine voting record. I'm sure that looks good in his report card.
And they'll all be getting money from Rick Snyder, I'm sure.
Yeah. The other bill, real quick, because we got to move on, but the other thing is imposing licensure on hunting and fishing guides. This is something Rep. Riley led the fight against when the Republicans had the majority. Now the Democrats just rammed it through. Once again, plenty of Republicans voted for this to make it seem to get a permission from the state to be a hunting and fishing guide. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Republicans. Good job. There were some Republicans that voted no on this, but not enough. So it went through overwhelmingly. I just hear some static on my line, seeing if I can make it go away. All right, what else do we have for tonight, Shane? We got a few other topics. Tucker Carlson's back on Twitter. That's a thing. Let's talk about that. I'm sure most people here have seen his first 3 episodes.
I've been impressed with what he's done on Twitter thus far. Seems like, he's hitting his stride. He seems like he's kind of testing the boundaries, going a little bit further than what he was able to do on Fox News. So, and if you look at how many people are watching it, it's like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. So I think Fox News really created a monster here. They overstepped. they thought that they could control Tucker. They thought that he would, take the money and say nothing until after 2024. But, I think they've actually just kind of unleashed him. And there might be way more high profile people who think, well, I'll just get on Twitter. I'll get way more traffic and then figure out ways to monetize that later. And I won't have to deal with all the BS of whatever network is trying to control me or put editorial constraints on me. You combine, Twitter with what Substack is, and you have, something that could, completely destroy what's left of the mainstream corporate fake news media. So I hope that this is them overreaching and them paying dearly for their mistakes, because the first 3 episodes were all very good.
Yeah, they were. Although I should say they were also not the same as Tucker's old show. And to your point about his content, I do think, and Glenn Greenwald talked about this too, that only after he left The Intercept and started his own media company did he realize how constraining it is to work for another business. And I think he is going to become untethered. But at the same time, his 10 to 12 minute monologues are not the same as his old show, where he had lots of interviews and reporters and all that stuff. I hope it's certainly possible that he's just, he's trying to get on the air as quick as he can and just hasn't gotten things spun up yet. But it's also possible that he hasn't yet figured out how to monetize. And I don't know. I have no idea how you would monetize a show on Twitter. I do know how you can monetize shows on YouTube. I've seen people do it, and people monetizing, on other platforms like Twitch and so forth. But I haven't seen him do that yet. So I don't know how he's going to translate those millions and millions of views into dollars. I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the microphone here. I'm getting feedback. Let me see if it goes away if I turn my microphone off.
I think you sound fine to me.
Okay, maybe it's just my headphones then. Maybe that's what the issue is. Anyway, okay, then I'll try my best to ignore the static because it's driving me bonkers. But anyway, yeah, I certainly wish Tucker the best, but 10 minutes every 2 nights a week is not enough. So he's got to do a lot more, and so we certainly wish him the best. Fox News, of course, clearly wishes him the worst. They sent him that nasty cease and desist, which even not only threatened a lawsuit, but said that you can't report on this document, which, by the way, is complete BS. There's a lawyer can't just say in a threat letter, and we're denying you your ability to report on this, which is complete gibberish. But that just goes to show how much of an axe to grind Fox News has against Tucker, because he's not competing with Fox, not in the media space that they were on, not even in the he doesn't have his own streaming service competing with Fox Nation yet. But they're trying to, and this just goes to prove it was all ideological to begin with. That's why they fired him. The whole cover story about Dominion was absolute nonsense. Of course it was, because there was other people on Fox News that did far more than he did on the whole Dominion claims.
Yeah, Tucker was always reticent in embracing some of those more outlandish conspiracy theories, or whatever you want to call them, about election fraud. I remember thinking, getting angry that he wasn't going further on those issues in the aftermath of 2020. But I think he realized this is, I'm stepping on a landmine here potentially.
He was rigorous, is what it was. Like when he had Sidney Powell on, he said, "What evidence do you have to support this? Because if you don't, we're going to report that you have no evidence to support this." And sure enough, Sidney Powell is cooked, and Tucker, adequately disclaimed everything that other people were saying to make clear that was not his position, and he was grilling them about it. And these are things that viewers don't like to hear. When you're being told a fantasy story like Sidney Powell was, you alienate your viewers, and Tucker had the courage to do that. And so, yeah, that was clearly a false story. Of course, the other thing that's come out is all these lawmakers in the media anonymously saying, "We're so happy that Tucker is off there because he kept criticizing Republicans," which I thought Democrats have been saying for years. Well, Fox News is just a Republican mouthpiece. Well, their biggest host was attacking Republicans. So clearly his incentive was not just to carry the Fox line, but to be independent and be questioning the establishment. So,
well, if you remember that when he got his 8 p.m. Time slot, it was because Bill O'Reilly just got Me Too'd or something.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
He was just kind of shuffled in there, I think, as a temporary replacement. And then he was doing so well and got such high ratings that they couldn't replace him, that he became the star of the network. So it wasn't like he was groomed for this position. He was like a once in a month host of Hannity, might appear on, on the panel of some, Fox and Friends kind of guy. He was like a second, third rate commentator before he got thrust into that role and then really made the most of it. So I think we probably wanted to get rid of him for some time now. And because as we've seen, especially the sons of Rupert Murdoch, I don't think Rupert Murdoch was ever a conservative, but he realized, where his bread was buttered. But his sons are more activists, and they're willing to kill the golden goose if it means keeping Trump out in 2024. And that's what they've done, fearing that Tucker, would disrupt the narrative that is being crafted, throw a wrench in it, and be able to get the word out to so many people. But now Tucker has the potential to get the word out to magnitudes more over Twitter. So it's backfiring.
Yeah, it's great to see. Boycott Fox, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I have one nitpick about something Tucker said on his very first episode, and that'll lead into our final segment tonight. And that was his first episode, you'll recall, was all about the question of who blew up the dam in Kherson, in Ukraine, or the contested part of Ukraine, I should say. We're going to talk a little bit about what's the latest is. When we did our show, not last Sunday, but the week before, we were saying, still haven't seen that offensive yet. Well, it turns out literally as we spoke, the offensive was beginning in Ukraine. So we'll talk more about that, and particularly the question about the dam. But one of the things that Tucker said in passing, near the end of that first segment that he did, was he said, we all know who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, not the dam, the pipeline, referring back to the incident that happened a few months earlier. And he was either directly saying or very strongly implying, we all know Ukraine blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Well, no, Tucker, we don't know that. In fact, your reporting on that issue at the time wasn't that Ukraine blew up the pipeline. It was that all signs pointed to the United States blowing up that pipeline. I have no doubt Ukraine would want to destroy the pipeline, but they didn't have the ability to destroy the pipeline. But where did this sudden knowledge that Tucker says everybody has come from, that Ukraine blew up the pipeline? Well, it came from a single story in the Washington Post citing anonymous CIA officials, so no way to verify anything they say, saying that the evidence, according to the CIA, is that Ukraine blew up the pipeline. Well, if you think about the story, it says a lot of things. First off, it says we're already transitioning into the phase where our deep state is now throwing Ukraine under the bus because they know Ukraine is not going to win this war. And they want to wash their hands of it and say, we did everything we could. We sent you all the weapons we can. Sorry, Zelensky, you didn't prosecute the war properly, and you may have even committed a war crime with the Nord Stream pipeline. But what's the CIA going to say? Because here's the thing. They were trying for months to scapegoat the Russians. Didn't stick. They squelched all the international investigations. The Sweden did an investigation and says, we can't tell you what our investigation found, because what their investigation find. What Seymour Hersh reported. What do you have firsthand sources saying? The United States blew up the pipeline. Well, the CIA is not going to admit that. So this is their last best defense on the pipeline. So again, not a huge game changer on Tucker's show, but I thought that's strange. That was an oversight, and that was something that plays into some uncomfortable facts about Ukraine that we need to acknowledge, which is namely our role in the whole thing. And the other thing too, because if you noticed on Tucker's third episode, the one he put out, what was it? I guess it was yesterday. His third show was yesterday. Very, 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 very pro-Trump show. Very pro-Trump episode. I mean, he basically said Trump is the only anti-war candidate in the race, which is not entirely true. You got RFK Jr. and DeSantis' position is still kind of ambiguous, but a very Trumpy show. Anyway, the point being, what's the huge revelation about the fact that the United States, not Ukraine, blew up the Nord Stream pipeline? Because that is the most impeachable offense committed by the Biden administration. Blowing up the critical infrastructure of an ally and not even telling Congress about it. That is a crime that, again, that is an act of war against a NATO ally. If you take that away and say, well, we didn't blow up the pipeline, Ukraine did, you're depriving the entire narrative of the best allegation against Joe Biden, is that he committed a war crime that dwarfs all of the fake impeachments of Trump. So in service of Donald Trump, let's not mitigate the facts of the Nord Stream pipeline bombing. Anyway, just my little nitpick about Tucker. I'm sure they'll get better as things go. But
And
how do you think about that, Shane?
Well, yeah, it's terrorism. And if you look at the German government, they don't even want to acknowledge that it might have been the U.S. or Ukraine. They don't want it investigated. That's how, sacked that country is. That's how these countries are just totally controlled and not for the people in the slightest. So it's, the Russian war on Ukraine is really kind of exposing exactly how decadent and decaying and pathetic all these Western countries have become. And, all this, billions of dollars thrown into Ukraine, all this military might, all this planning and strategizing and training troops by the U.S., it has not, all it has really done is just resulted in way more Ukrainian people dying than otherwise would have if they had been able to come to some sort of peaceful conclusion shortly after the conflict happened. So that's going to be the aftermath.
They were, until the West intervened and said, no, don't do it. They had a peace plan ready to go in April 1st of last year. And people said in the beginning of the attack, they're like, "Oh, look at how incompetent the Russian military is. They didn't accomplish anything when they stormed into Kiev." Well, they actually did accomplish what they were trying to do. What they were trying to do was get the Zelensky regime to the table, and they did because they were ready to negotiate. And the deal was going to be Ukraine must be a neutral state, and they can't let NATO in, and they can't militarize. And Ukraine was ready to take the deal until Boris Johnson flew into panic and said, "Don't you dare do this. We're going to fund you and arm you, and you're going to destroy Russia, and it'll all be great." And of course, we see now how that's gone. And to that point, I'm sure you guys have seen in the mass media how wonderful the offensive has been going. Folks, the offensive has just resulted in more of the same story on an accelerated timeline. And this, by the way, this is definitely the offensive. I mean, you don't put your best vehicles that you got from the West, the Bradleys and the Leopard tanks, the Leopard 2 tanks, into it just to do reconnaissance and force. Zelensky and the Ukrainians are not claiming this is an offensive, because if it fails, they want to say, well, we didn't do it yet because we still need more weapons and money from the West. But this was absolutely the offensive. And we're on, I think, day 10 now. And for the first week, Ukraine didn't even get to the defensive lines of Russia, and just destroying machines and men. And now there's been a few like minor breakthroughs here and there, but still nowhere even getting near to Russia's second defensive lines. And everything that most of the skirmishes they've had have just been like Ukraine gets a couple of hundred meters of territory only to be taken back in the next few days. So the whole thing is just a disaster on an accelerated timeline. And it's getting to the point of, this is an article that just came out 5 days ago. Can Biden deter a Russian nuclear attack on Ukraine? Yeah, if he gives Ukraine tactical nukes. They're talking now about escalating this even farther. This is from the American Enterprise Institute, another one of those mainstream Republican capitalism first, fiscally conservative organizations right there.
That's the kind of respectable conservatism that the rhinos believe we need to get back to and get rid of Trump for.
Yeah, these are the more sensible, moderate people who are talking about nuclear Armageddon. And it is that, by the way, folks. I actually when I was looking for the article, I just got a flood of articles. They're all just Russia's talking about using nukes. Russia talking about using nukes. Yeah, they're talking about to remind the United States how serious this is, because they think we need reminding, because we're the ones who broke the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. We're the ones who are threatening now to send nuclear weapons to Ukraine. And here's what's going to happen. If a nuclear weapon is used in Ukraine, it's all over. There will be nukes flying from Russia to the United States and from the United States to Russia, and we all die. And That's the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. That's what people went into the streets in the hundreds of thousands in the 1960s to protest, was how dangerous that was. That was what Kennedy and Khrushchev, even though they were enemies, understood. We got to walk back from this because this threatens all of human civilization. And this is what the neocons in Washington have absolutely no respect for whatsoever, because in their minds, Russians are inferior humans. They're idiots. They're dangerous. They have to be destroyed no matter what. That's the mentality of Nazis. And that's who's in charge in Washington right now. Hence Ukraine, the Nazi capital of the world, where you have their tanks with swastikas and iron crosses and shit on them. It's insane. It is absolutely insane. So let's get back to that final question. Let's end the show on this. Who broke the dam? Who broke the dam? It is a mystery. There is no definitive answer on this. And there is always at least the possibility that it was some kind of accident. So there is always that, and we don't know for sure. But I want to bring up an article which I think is the most fair-minded, because those who watch the show a lot know what I think about this. I just went on a rant about this. You might guess what my opinion about who the more likely party is here. But this, I thought, was a fair-minded analysis from a blog called, I don't know if it's pronounced Simplicious or Simplicious, The Thinker he goes by, and that's his blog. You can see in the address bar there, simplicious76.substack.com. And this is a fair-minded analysis on both sides of what happened. Of course, Russia accuses Ukraine of doing it. Ukraine accuses Russia of doing it. Let's see where the facts take us. So this is a fair article. There's also, by the way, if you want to find out more about Ukraine stuff, this guy's content on the day-to-day goings-on of the war is absolutely top-notch. So you can check him out. Here's what he says about the dam. This article came out, you can see, just a day later. This was on June 6th. So there's been more evidence since then we can talk about near the end. So he says, first, mention the preponderance of evidence showing that Ukrainian officials have previously bragged about hitting the dam, as well as their plans in destroying it. And you're sharing this Washington Post article, of course, where the Ukraine's major general admitted to striking the dam with HIMARS to test their ability to hit it so they can have that in their pocket as a potential plan to cut off Russian forces, where they say it was a success. So that's kind of a big thing. Ukraine's actually tried shooting at the dam, which let's not undersell the seriousness of this. This is an environmental catastrophe. This is long-term humanitarian damage. This is a war crime. And this is ecological terrorism. This is going to damage the river and the Black Sea for years and years and years to come. Whichever side did this is a serious, very serious war crime. And these guys were just playing around with shooting missiles at the dam. But then again, they're also shooting missiles earlier at the nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye. So there was that too. So they talk about this. And he says, now Ukrainian officials and top Telegram channels have been caught deleting their previous posts from last year where they gloated and bragged about having hit the dam repeatedly. And you can see there's some of these comments on these Telegram channels. So there's that. Here they even bragged about penetrating the lock of the dam, which I take to mean the actual damming mechanism itself rather than the roadway/bridge adjacent to the dam. And let's also talk about the Western and Ukrainian experts who were caught previously admitting that Russia would be shooting itself in the foot by destroying the dam and had nothing to gain by it. And here's all these people who, of course, now say Russia blew up the dam, saying they wouldn't do this. And so here they have a quote from this guy, Michael Kaufman. And now he goes through, how would this benefit Ukraine? Well, the most obvious, it washes away a lot of Russian positions. Russia had mined the entire region to prevent the expected huge Ukrainian landing force attempt. Flooding now expected to potentially wash away all of Russia's mines and would give Ukraine a clear path once the water settles down. Gives Ukraine a propaganda victory and potentially damages the Zaporozhye nuclear power plants and allow them to string it to a larger false flag later on. It looks like for now the plant is all right. And it will imperil the Crimean water supply. Ukraine has always wanted to, first and foremost, take back Crimea. And so there's all these things. But now he also has some other counterpoints. Let's take these seriously. First, Russia was said to have controlled the dam. On one hand, this gives them an easier ability to destroy it in the cleanest way possible if they should want to do so. But the biggest evidence against this is that Russia, having controlled the dam, could simply have lifted the floodgates at any point, Same as with the Nord Stream. If they wanted to blow up Nord Stream, they just could have turned it off. They didn't need to blow it up, and which is an important point. And the Ukraine claimed that Russia destroyed the dam in order to flood the river and stop a potential Ukrainian river crossing. Why would Russia need to destroy it if they can just turn the gates off? Makes no sense. Or just open the floodgates, I mean. And there is some evidence that Russia could feasibly do it, but that's only that if they did it in this certain way. So there's that. But he says it is plausible that Russia did it, and it is a fact that it damages and benefits both sides to a certain extent. And he goes on to make what he calls the strongest argument that Russia could have done it. So let's go to that. How might the dam destruction benefit Russia? The critical who benefits question. So he points out, conversely to what was said before about Russian positions being swept away, it can be said that Ukrainian positions inside those islands, this is Kherson right here, Ukrainian city. Russia was having a hell of a time with the recalcitrant AFU constantly entrenching themselves on these marshy islands. The flooding conveniently allows Russia to wash away all their forward positions, entrenchments here, there, everywhere. One of the key things Ukraine has been doing in these islands is setting up drone repeaters and relays, small antennas that allow their drones to double and triple their range. They can be flown all the way from Kherson all the way to Russia's positions, 5 to 10 kilometers, by amplifying the signal of the controllers. Here's one of the most compelling arguments I've seen for why the situation greatly benefits Russia. If Russia wants to cross the Dnieper and liberate places like Odessa, which I suspect they do, because if Russia takes Odessa, then Ukraine is now permanently landlocked. This dam needed to be blown up. General Surovikin understood this immediately. He's the field general for the special military operation. There's one technically above him, but he's really the day-to-day commander. So the spring rains filled it up, but for Russian troops to recross and move toward the Russian city of Odessa to liberate the east and connect with Russian troops isolated in Transnistria, that's a strip in Moldova, which is like kind of the southwest corner between, it's like in the southwest corner of Ukraine, and there's a strip of it that's like Russian controlled. The dam needed to go, and this would prevent Ukraine from isolating and surrounding the Russian troops in Transnistria. The water also now makes a protective barrier for a few weeks, at least on the Russian west side, so Russia can concentrate in the north, where the Ukrainian main counteroffensive is trying to develop. Now the Russian flank is protected. Otherwise, Russia would need to keep a lot more troops in here to counter their Ukrainian raids, keeping men tied up, because if they let them go through these groups, will move between the army in the north and Crimea. And finally, it allows blame to be placed laid at the Ukraine door. I doubt that. It certainly doesn't. The Western media is much more influential than the Russian media is. So that's the argument. He says very convincing, and he does agree with the points of it, but I'm not feasible how it would ever be for Russia to cross the Dnieper with or without the dam. So there's that, and he makes this final point, which is, I think, critical. This does not seem to be Putin's style at all, because it harms way too many civilians and goes against the entire creed of the special military operation, which was the preservation of the civilians at all costs and a war only against the regime forces. And people like Scott Ritter have been talking about this for the past year, that when the U.S. military goes into a place, first thing to do is knock out civilian infrastructure, knock out electricity, knock out heads of state, destroy the most critical things immediately. Whereas Russia's approach has constantly been, let's do this by the books, let's avoid hurting civilians, let's keep this strictly between our militaries. You know, they didn't, I mean, and perfect example of the difference between how Ukraine has prosecuted this war versus Russia. A few weeks ago, Ukraine tried to assassinate Putin using drones flown at the Kremlin. Well, the other day, Zelensky went to Kherson to do a photo op and say it was the evil Russians that blew up the dam and blah, blah, blah. Russia knew exactly where Zelensky was for that entire period. They didn't assassinate him. That's not the kind of stuff that Russia does. And people can argue with me about that. I'm sure people disagree with that. But the problem is, it's not consistent with what Russia's done, because if they wanted to just, attack Kiev directly and destroy the institutions of the government itself, they could do that. And remember, too, Russia didn't even start knocking out electricity in Ukraine until after Ukraine blew up the Kerch Bridge. That was when they said, all right, well, another line's been crossed now. If you're going to blow up civilian infrastructure like this, then all right, well, then we're going to start blowing up your power plants. So that's a big thing. And then, like I said, this article came out the day after the bridge was blown up, but then the day after that story started to come out, and people pointed out, and this to me is a smoking gun, there's dams upriver from that, and Ukraine opened their floodgates and left them open after the flood happened. They didn't try to turn them off to minimize the casualties or minimize the damage to the environment. They left those floodgates further up the river wide open to make this have the maximum impact possible. If Ukraine did it, if Russia did it and Ukraine wanted to minimize that effect, they wouldn't have done that. So there you go, folks. I don't know. That's my take on all this, but and that's kind of a lot. So I don't know. You got any thoughts on that, man? On where this is all going?
I mean, it's going to get worse. The U.S. has dumped too much money into this. The propaganda is too strong. Still, I mean, you still drive through the suburbs and you see Ukraine flags semi-regularly. So the public is in a trance regarding this, and they've got to believe in just completely false reality.
I think Washington's the one in the trance. I think the public doesn't give a crap about any of this. I mean, no one at the bar is talking about Ukraine, that's for sure. But in Washington, they obsess with it all the time, constantly, every single day.
It has to do with Russia, the whole Trump thing, and they hacked the election for Trump, and this is their chance to get vengeance. So the political class is beyond deranged now. Yeah,
and they think that a war with Russia is going to benefit Biden politically in the next election. That Trump is the stooge of Putin and blah blah blah. Going to play that narrative to the nth degree. And the problem they have is Ukraine might have lost the war by then. And what are they going to do next? And this is the big debate in Washington between the Ukraine fanatics like Victoria Nuland, and then there's the other side, which is not anti-war, but they want a war with China right now. And they see this whole war in Ukraine as a distraction. They're like, let's go to war with China over Taiwan. And this is what a lot of the Republican neocons are all about. That's what Mark Milley's new replacement is about, is moving past the Ukraine war and getting into the China war. Because that'll go a lot better than the Ukraine war went. But
and a lot of it, has to do, I think, with, they're planning on they'll have Zelensky on every TV station next year saying how Biden stood strong and how Trump, was in the pocket of the Ruskies. And even if they lose, the news media will just tell the American people that they won, and enough people are that stupid. Tens of millions are that stupid where they'll believe it. They'll tell you that, Russia's isolated, Russia's losing, and, they've been exposed when literally the exact opposite is true. So
the exact opposite is true. The whole world, the ones being isolated is the United States. And you see this with BRICS, which has 32 countries now that have signed on to it. Hey, Dwayne, man, you have to catch the replay because we're at the end of the show now, buddy. I see, you've missed a few things. We talked about a few things here and there. But yeah, you see it with BRICS. You see it with the peace in the Middle East and all these Middle Eastern countries getting away from the dollar. You see it with India getting away from the dollar. The problem is it's not a war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between Russia and NATO and Washington. And we're losing this war. And the Biden administration can't admit fault, can't admit wrongdoing. They're too conceited. And their only option is to escalate. And tomorrow it's F-16s. But at the end of the day, if this isn't resolved, the next thing is nuclear weapons. And you can't get up a day without worrying about this because anything can go wrong at any time. One mistake. There's almost a nuclear holocaust in the 1960s. And it wasn't because of Kennedy or Khrushchev. It was because of just some random sub commander in Russia, the Soviet Union, made a mistake. And luckily the mistake was caught. Had it not been, doctrinally, and the sub would have deployed nuclear weapons, our nukes would have gone towards the USSR, their nukes would have gone towards us, and millions of people would have died. And that's how serious this is. And these people in Washington, and this gets the closing theme of the show here, folks, is all these clowns, the Democrats, the rhinos, the deep state, the neocons. They are dangers to civilization itself, as well as dangers to our constitutional republic and all the rest. So hope you all really put everything you can into this election and work like it might be our last, because the way things are going, it just might be. So, all right, that's our show for tonight. Shane, is there anything else you want to mention before we go? Oh, I've got some things to mention. Tomorrow night is the movie night at Washtenaw GOP headquarters, an encore presentation of What is a Woman. You can go to WashtenaWrepublicans.org. If you haven't seen that movie already, it's phenomenal. So you can visit us there. It starts at 5:30. Go to WashtenaWrepublicans.org. Click the link for the calendar. You'll see the details with the time of the showing. And June 25th, you lucky bastards in Oakland County have Donald Trump for your Lincoln Day dinner, which I have a feeling will outsell ours. I think it already has, but Rescue Mission will have a table there, so you can come see us there at the Donald J. Trump headlined, keynoted Oakland County Lincoln Day dinner. That is Sunday, June 25th, and I will put on the screen where you can find the right browser tab here. Hold on. See here. Let's back up on the screen. Oh, it's oaklandgop.com. Is it not loading for some reason?
I think .net.
.net. Okay. See if that does the trick. oaklandgop.net. Oh yeah, this looks like it's working. Okay. oaklandgop.org. Aha, it forwarded. And there is the link to the Lincoln Day dinner with special guest, President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. So check it out. Visit us there. It's going to be a heck of a time. And with that, I think the only thing left to do is once again remind everybody, if you like this kind of content, please be sure to leave a like, share it with other people, subscribe to the channel on YouTube and Rumble, follow us on Twitter, and leave comments. That's always good for the algorithm as well. And I think with that, we'll call it a stream. We'll be back at our regular time this Sunday night, 9 p.m. We will have some roll call votes for you on which Republicans voted for those BS election fraud bills, because we've got an axe to grind now for several of them. So thanks as always for all you guys do for liberty. Until next time, peace out.